There's only one game left in the 2024 NFL season, so I feel like enough time has gone by to see how this year's rookie class has done. This video will not be about the guys who were drafted in the top 10 or even in the first round for the most part, but instead today I want to highlight 15 rookies who kind of came out of nowhere in 2024. These are guys who were not drafted in the first round, maybe weren't expected to do a whole lot in their first year, or completely came out of nowhere. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's talk about rookies who came out of nowhere in 2024. Okay, so the first guy we're to talk about is Bucky Irving, a running back for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He wasn't just one of the best rookie running backs in the league, he was actually one of the best backs in general. He was drafted with the 125th overall pick in the 4th round, as Irving ended up originally going to Minnesota before finishing his college career at Oregon and then going to the Bucs. He started this year as the backup to Rachaad White, but he slowly started to take on more carries per game. His role as a change of pace back eventually turned him into a running back 1 by the end of the year, to the point where he was running back 1 in the postseason essentially. He finished the year with 1,122 yards, and White only had about 608 touchdowns. Irving also had 77 rush yards in the Bucs' one postseason game, and he was one of 16 backs to have more than 1,000 yards on the ground, and he was 10th on the list of those running backs. He might be the biggest steal in the entire draft, and Irving has a very bright future, and you can check out my full-length video on him I did a couple months ago. Okay, so the next guy is Edgerrin Cooper, a linebacker from Green Bay. He wasn't exactly unheard of coming out of Texas A&M, since he was drafted with the 45th overall pick in the 2nd round, but he quietly put together one of the best seasons by a linebacker in the 2024 season. He worked his way up the depth chart to his starting spot by week 8, and despite missing 3 weeks with a hamstring injury, he still managed to put up 87 tackles, 3.5 sacks, and an interception. In terms of the rest of the linebackers on Green Bay's roster, he was their greatest sack threat and had the 5th most sacks on the team in general. His 1 interception was tied for the most from a Packer linebacker, and his total tackles had him second only to Quay Walker. To put it in another way, his rookie season was so impressive, stat-wise, it put him on pace to be with guys like Cam Hayward and Roquan Smith. He had a phenomenal year, and should be one of the better linebackers in the NFL if he can keep this up. Okay, so our third guy is Andrew Phillips. He was a corner that was taken in the late 3rd round out of Kentucky that did not have much noise entering 2024, and wasn't really expected to be a huge part of the Giants' defense, especially considering their defensive backs already included Adoree Jackson, Cordell Flott, and Deonte Banks. Instead, Andrew ended up carving a niche role for himself at the nickel position, proving to be a good player in both the passing and running game, with 71 total tackles, an interception, and a sack. The Giants would end up going 3-14 on the season, which is one of their worst years ever, and they were rewarded with a top 3 pick. But on defense, Drew ended up coming out with better stats than any other corner on the roster, proving that he might be the gem that helped start to reform that defense. His 71 tackles were 5th on the team and highest by a corner, and given he also plays nickel, he's tied for 1st with his 1 interception on the team. He's a guy to build around for the Giants. Okay, so our 4th guy is Braden Fisk. Fisk was drafted by the Rams at the 39th overall pick out of Florida State, so he wasn't completely out of nowhere to begin with, but he performed better than the Rams probably thought he could when they drafted him. Coming from Florida State by way of Western Michigan, Fisk was 6'4" and 290 pounds and was compared to Aaron Donald going into the draft, and the Rams literally needed a new Aaron Donald. Fisk provided that by leading the team in total sacks with 8.5, with a half sack more than 2nd-year pro Kobe Turner, providing 90 yards lost in sacks to the defense. He also had 44 total tackles, with 10 of those being for loss, and 2 forced fumbles, meaning he was one of the best players in the country at flipping the field. Pass rushing defensive tackles are sort of a rarity these days in the National Football League, and it's hard to find good ones in the draft. Los Angeles has found one in Braden Fisk, and he'll likely continue to wreak havoc on the NFC for the next few years. Okay, so at number 5 we have Tyrone Tracy, a running back for the New York Giants. He was drafted by the Giants in the 5th round after splitting his college career at both Iowa and Purdue, and was intended to sit behind Devin Singletary as a backup running back. But when Singletary got hurt in week 5, Tyrone became the team's starting running back. In his first game, he put up nearly 130 yards on 18 carries. When Singletary came back, Tracy still had a lot of carries per game, as he ended up finishing the year as the team's starting running back, taking over officially by week 8. He finished the year with 839 rushing yards and 5 touchdowns, though he also had 2 fumbles. He was a dual threat through the air as well, registering 284 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown. He's taken over as the Giants' starting running back for the foreseeable future, and with potentially a new quarterback coming in this year's draft, he could be a part of a new offense that includes Malik Neighbors. Good coaching could turn the Giants around very quickly, and Tracy was definitely a steal. The next guy on the list is Tarheeb Still, a corner for the Chargers. Entering the draft, he was a relative unknown coming out of Maryland, despite making a second and third team All-Big Ten appearance. So when he was drafted by the Chargers late in the 5th round of the 24 draft, there wasn't much of an expectation that he would break out with them. He finished the year with 62 total tackles, 10 pass deflections, and 4 total interceptions as well, earning ball hawk status as a true rookie. His 4 interceptions led the entire team, and he only played in 14 games for the Chargers. He would start the year as the 6th outside corner on the roster, behind Asante Samuel, Christian Fulton, Cam Hart, Leonard, and Eli Apple. But he made the most of his in-game snaps to the point where he should elevate his position to cornerback 3, or maybe even cornerback 2 for next year once Asante comes back from his injury. Pairing him alongside Elijah Molden could create another great defensive backfield and an offensive-focused AFC West. Another guy we need to talk about is Tykee Smith, a Buccaneers defensive back. Smith was a late 3rd round pick out of Georgia who had envisioned him quickly becoming a contributor in the defensive backfield. But as both a safety and a nickelback, Tykee had moved up his timeline with Tampa Bay into being an immediate contributor with 7 pass deflections on the year, 2 picks, and 3 forced fumbles, as well as a total of 54 tackles. His 7 pass deflections ranked 2nd on the entire team, and his interceptions were tied with Zion McCollum. His 3 forced fumbles are also tied for 1st on the team with Levante David, a longtime veteran, and he's one of the best linebackers in the league. Tykee's unique Swiss Army knife defensive positioning allowed him to be both a midfield threat and a coverage nightmare, something that not many NFL teams have been utilizing in their packages, but makes him a special player. The next guy is Dominick Puni, a guard for the 49ers. He arrived in San Francisco as a late 3rd round pick out of Kansas, and he was a late riser in the draft due to his consistency at the college level. He instantly won out the starting job, becoming the team's starting right guard for the team as a rookie, and he was part of an offensive line that allowed 36 sacks and 190 sack yards on the season, allowing just 2.1 sacks per game, which placed them 11th in the entire league. The 49ers averaged 127 rush yards per game and 260 passing yards per game, while as a whole the team struggled in certain areas at times. Dominick was a bright spot along the line, and should become one of the better offensive linemen in San Francisco going into the future. All roads lead to this year's Super Bowl. The wild ride to New Orleans is almost over, and the big game is just around the corner. For fans looking to cash in on this year's Super Bowl, MyBookie is where it's at. They've packed in promotions, props, and features that make betting on this event not only exciting, but also profitable. So here's the playbook for this year's Super Bowl. There's a couple of props that you can bet on, which include how long it'll last, if the singer will nail every word or have a ton of slip-ups, and heck, even the color of this year's Gatorade. Yeah, MyBookie has tons of options, and if you bet on, there are a couple of options including boosted parlays, the money bag, squares, tiered bonuses, and live betting and streaming. When you decided what you're going to pick, go over to MyBookie and use my promo code Fisher50 for your first bet. Celebrate your Super Bowl Sunday by having a good time with MyBookie, and get your game plan ready. If you're one of those people that thinks the NFL is rigged for the Chiefs, you can now use MyBookie to put your money where your mouth is. If there's one thing for certain, we have no idea what's going to happen during the big game this year, but be sure to head over to MyBookie to make this Sunday a little bit more entertaining. Thank you to them for sponsoring today's video. Okay, so another under-the-radar rookie was Evan Williams, a safety for Green Bay. He was picked up by Green Bay in the 4th round coming out of Oregon, as he entered an open competition to be the other starting safety alongside Xavier McKinney, and he'd end up beating out Zane Anderson and Javon Bullard for that spot, and instantly proved why he was a good choice for that role. He finished the season helping Green Bay's defense reach the playoffs with 49 total tackles, 1 forced fumble, 3 pass deflections, and an interception. Helping safety Xavier McKinney lock down the other side of the field, he made Pro Football Focus's all-rookie team alongside Adrian Cooper, and the Packers got a couple of good players in this draft class late. Defensive backs are some of the most difficult players to land on, especially later on in the draft process, so to find Evan was a huge success for Green Bay, especially if he keeps up this momentum going into this year. Okay, so we have another running back from Indiana like Tracy, as we have to talk about Carson Steele. He was a guy who was one of the more interesting prospects in the 2024 draft, as he had his long flowing hair and a pet alligator, but after a little bit of a drop-off at UCLA, he ended up going undrafted. The Chiefs signed him as an undrafted free agent, as he was going to be both a running back and a fullback, and nobody expected him to make their roster. But he had such a good preseason that he made the active roster, and when the Chiefs had running back depth issues and an injury to Isaiah Pacheco, He stepped up to be a good change of pace back with 72 yards against Atlanta in Week 3 and multiple kick returns for good yardage. His yards aren't all that high because Kansas City specifically uses him as a fullback, but he leads fullbacks in terms of rushing yards with 183 yards, which is almost 150 more than the player in second place. Most NFL teams either don't utilize a fullback or restrict them to being primarily blockers, but Steele instantly is one of the best in the league and maybe could become the next Mike Alstott at the next level. Next up is Cooper Beebe, the Dallas Cowboys center. The only position that Beebe didn't play alongside the offensive line in college was center, but he's been a good player there for the Cowboys this season. According to Pro Football Focus, Cooper is not only the second best rookie center in this entire draft class, but he's already one of the better centers in the league, only allowing 3 sacks from the center position, which typically allows more sacks than any of the other interior offensive lineman spots. He also played well in the rushing game despite Dak Prescott being out for most of the year, and he would help Dallas's running backs as Rico Dowdle came out of nowhere and ran for over 1,000 yards. He does have room for improvement though, as he had 3 penalties and 3 sacks allowed, and has work to do in terms of preventing quarterback hits. There's a chance he'll become one of the better centers in the league with better coaching. Okay, so now we get another defensive back in Mike Sanderstil. He was another DB that was taken in the second round that had some hype going into the draft, but wasn't projected to be that much of a good player right out of the gate. He was a 5-year starter at Michigan who originally came in as a wide receiver, but moved to defensive back after not getting enough playing time. He displayed good ball skills, but just okay athleticism, which caused him to fall out of the first round. Despite that, he instantly became one of the better corners in this year's draft class as he was drafted by the Commanders and did well. He started 16 games in a 17-game season and had a total of 93 tackles as well as 2 picks and 14 pass deflections. His 93 tackles had him ranked 3rd out of all corners in the NFL, and he allowed just 54 receptions when targeted all year, good enough for 16th in the league. He should help Washington's defense for a long time. Okay, so we have another center, and that is Zach Frazier. The Pro Football Focus grades speak for themselves with Frazier, as he was ranked 6th in terms of all-around center play. He was 22nd in pass blocking and 6th in run blocking, making him not just one of the better offensive linemen in the draft as a whole, but like Beebe, one of the best centers in the league. He was a late 2nd round pick out of West Virginia to the Steelers, but centers and interior offensive linemen don't typically make a lot of noise in the draft, and the chances of finding a good lineman in the draft aren't all that great, it seems. But in 975 snaps, Zach allowed just 1 sack at the center spot with 5 penalties, helping the Steelers' rush offense go for over 2,100 yards and 14 touchdowns. He also allowed just 2 quarterback hits during the entire season, with just 12 pressures overall. The Steelers' offensive line was quietly rebuilt in just a few seasons, and Zach Frazier is going to be a huge part of that. Okay, so our next guy is Omar Speights, a linebacker for the Rams. He was pretty much a complete nobody at the NFL scouting circle coming out of LSU and went completely undrafted before signing with the Los Angeles Rams before the season started. He became part of one of the better draft classes in the country, joining Jared Verse on the defense and spending some time with special teams, as he had a grand total of 49 solo tackles along with 4 pressures on 419 total snaps. He wasn't a world beater every time he was on the field, but he had a tendency to make big plays at big times, like when he strip-sacked Jalen Hurts in the playoffs to take the Eagles out of field goal range for that drive. At 6'1" and 225 pounds, he made his way into the starting inside linebacker spot after Troy Reeder went down with an injury and played his way into keeping his spot. Linebacker depth is important in the NFL, and as an undrafted free agent, Omar quickly became one of the better spot starters in the entire league, and that's really great for a rookie. Alright, so for our last guy in the video, we need to talk about Cameron Kinchens. Cameron was not supposed to be much of a contributor at the NFL level when he was drafted by the Rams, as he went in the 3rd round of the 2024 draft. This hadn't always been the case, as early on in the 2023 college football season, he was considered a 1st-round pick because of his insane 2022 season. But he slowly fell down draft boards and had that really scary injury, and people thought he could be a bust. The only reason he went as high as he did was because the Rams thought they could get his 2022 production back, which they did. He's become one of the brightest young safeties in the league after his rookie season, as he had 4 interceptions and 57 total tackles, as well as a defensive touchdown. He allowed just 24 catches in coverage during the 2024 campaign, and ended up being ranked as one of the better safeties in the league in terms of open field tackling. He was considered an overdraft at the beginning of the year, but proved himself quickly as a shining member of the Rams draft class. Okay, so yeah, today I talked about 15 rookies who sort of came out of nowhere, and guys that were going under the radar in the pre-draft process. Who is a guy I missed, and what sort of video style should I do next? Be sure to let me know down below, leave a like if you support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out all of the videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.